There we go.
Okay.
How are you? I'm good, thank you, and I'm getting used to the darker days as we get into our November.
Older darker days too. So this is an interview between Adele and I talking about circle time, or coaching circles as I kind of refer to them now, and it's just wonderful for us to have a chat about this, Adele.
It totally is. We met, how many years ago? Was it 2, 3?
Well, it was they were talking about COVID in the hotel we were staying at, and there were lots of people starting to wear masks. So it was February before COVID. And
I remembered.
2020, yeah. And I was just we were all thinking, is this is this going to
Yes. So we met there. We were both speaking, weren't we, at was it Behaviour conference?
It was the Wellbeing conference. I was doing the keynote. So yeah, it was, and you did an amazing talk as well at it. So yeah, I think it was the Wellbeing conference. They did
it was a Behaviour conference.
Mine was Behaviour. I can't remember.
But I think the reason I can remember as well, because we kind of clocked each other, and then it ended up we had no time. So you ended up coming to talk to me whilst I was trying to eat my breakfast. And it was one of those hotel breakfasts, so I wanted to eat loads. But I was like, I'm trying to talk to you about meeting loads. Anyway, I think we just found there's a massive crossover between circle time coaching and behaviour, of course. So we have been kind of skirting around this conversation around the crossover of those two things for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and I think we're both really interested in each other's work, because you do lots of behaviour work. My work's obviously been in behaviour management 20 plus years, and the circle time you felt really passionately about, and I felt I'm really passionate about as well. So it would be so lovely to have a conversation about it.
Shall we just introduce ourselves to each other's community so we know who we are? Do you want to introduce yourself to mine?
So I'm Therese Hoyle, and I have been working in social and emotional wellbeing and behaviour management for over, actually it's a bit scary, 25 plus years, I'll say, and my background is as a teacher as well. So I kind of came to this work as a teacher, and became really involved with social emotional wellbeing because of my class, and became very interested in the outdoor learning and behaviour of playtimes and lunchtimes too. But for me, it's about a whole school way. So circle time and coaching circles, as I now refer to it, is part of a wider picture for ongoing listening system in the school, which obviously creates better behaviour too. So yeah.
Thank you, and hello to your community. My name's Adele Bates. I'm a behaviour and education specialist, keynote speaker, and author of Miss I Don't Give a Shit, Engaging with Challenging Behaviour in Schools. I think that's the wrong way around. I haven't worked out yet how to flip my camera.
I can see it the right way around, so you're good. I've got my behind me. Do they look like they're the right way or wrong way around?
Yes, they're the right way.
I think they're the wrong way around too, so it just is what we see.
Yeah, so I've been teaching for nearly 20 years now, and I work both in mainstream and alternative provisions, so pupil referral units, schools with pupils with SEMH, social, emotional, mental health issues. And what I tend to do now is kind of sit between the two. So when I find there's a lot of amazing practice in alternative provisions around behaviour that is not being used in mainstream, and I believe and I know that if we were to use some of those practices more in mainstream, if we were able to support our mainstream staff more with behaviour needs, there would be fewer people being excluded. There are currently, the statistics are always changing, but the latest I've heard kind of during post-COVID is that there are 40 pupils being excluded a day in Britain. It's madness, and that to me says we're getting something very wrong. There's something wrong with our system if that many are being excluded. And I often work with those kids who are excluded once, twice. I work with a kid who was excluded 6 times from mainstream schools. What does that do to you? Your psyche, your brain, your feeling accepted in the education world, it affects you. So yeah,
long term, isn't it, Adele? It's not the short term, it's where that child's going to end up, because actually they don't feel nurtured, they don't feel accepted, they don't feel understood, and there's no system that is actually catering to their needs, and then
Absolutely.
they're out of the system, and then they're, well, we know they are, a lot of those end up in prison as well.
Yeah, I mean, the statistics around that are just hideous. Once you've been excluded, you're less likely to get GCSEs, you're more likely to go to prison, and apparently you cost the state £370,000 once you're excluded, because of all the kind of negative statistics, gang involvement, substance abuse, all these kind of things are more likely to happen, and so you actually end up costing the state more. So hence why, if we could really train and support our staff in mainstream to be more confident and have the skills and the tools like circle time, coaching time that we're going to come to, then we would actually be saving in the long run as well. So it's
a proactive system. I think that's what I've always looked at in education. What systems can we have that are proactive, not reactive? And actually what's really interesting is a lot of teachers say to me, oh, I do circle time when I've got a problem. It's like, no, that's not how we should be doing it. It is a proactive system that we do once a week at a set time, so that children feel safe and secure in the knowledge that their voice is going to be listened to. So I think it's really important that kind of we discuss proactive systems, because this whole, those children, if they felt like they were being listened to and their needs met, then maybe they wouldn't end up in these situations. And actually it's about that's where circle time comes in. It's a collaborative system that supports children who are struggling, and it's about that class system that because a lot of those children become he's the problem, that's the problem child in our class. The parents think, oh, that's the problem child, but actually they don't see, actually there are other children in this class that are actually winding this child up, making it a lot worse for him. So
will you, because I've used circle time I've actually never been trained in circle time. I've never had any training on it. I've used it in a way that I think works for me, because I'm very passionate about making micro communities in my classroom and letting the children discover, how do we work together and not fall out, even though we're different, even though we have different opinions. Because my belief is, if we can foster those skills in our classrooms, we're going to prevent wars. Because when those young people grow up, they're able to go, okay, someone has a different opinion from me, or someone's upset me, how do I deal with this? So I've used it kind of instinctively, but I would love if you could, Therese, explain for us. If someone's never used circle time, what is it? What does it do?
Well, that was me too. I had this incredibly challenging class. I was actually very into building self-esteem for my children. I had a year one class, and my head teachers thought I was doing such an amazing job, which I was using I was very into self-esteem, very into social emotional learning with my children, very into the whole child kind of work, and my head at the time said, you're doing such an amazing job, I'm going to give you them for a second year. So in that second year, a lot of the systems I was using had stopped working as effectively, and it was very interesting. I was like, gosh, some of what I started to use now isn't working. And I'd heard about circle time, and I started to, just like you, have a go at it, sit children in circle. I'd sit them on the mat, and we'd do a round of, one thing I'm looking forward to this week is, but I was aware I was having a go, but I didn't really know what I was doing. So I then went on a training with Jenny Mosley of the Quality Circle Time Training Programme. And it was amazing, really amazing. And in fact, I said to Jenny at the end of that, I was like, Jenny, I have to work with you. What can I do to work with you? This is just everything I believe in, but it was in a structured format. And I went back into my classroom, put circle time into place, kept in touch with Jenny. And it was transformative. It was, a little bit like the child I was just talking about who ends up in trouble. I had the little child, I'll call him Jack. And I was seeing the educational I had the parents in like 2 weeks before with the educational psychologist. He had huge needs, was always in trouble in the playground. He was getting into fights, just generally not fitting in with his peers, and reacting a lot, but also wasn't learning. And the educational site was like, oh, well, this is what we could do. I said, well, actually, this is the plan I've got. I've just been on this circle time, I'm going on this, I think it was after I've been on circle time training. I've been on the circle time training. I'm going to put this program into place. I'm tightening up my rules and reward systems, and I'm going to have golden time on a Friday, and I'm putting this whole system into place. So I said, can you just wait and see how it goes? But I'm going to really kind of include Jack in this process. Anyway, he didn't want to be involved in circle time. He was one of my classic gorgeous ones, who I always say, you know, he didn't. Yeah. So when he used to sit outside on the chair out of the circle, so all my lovelies were sitting in the circle, and then he would sit on it, and I was like, that's fine, Jack, if you just want to watch it and see how we do. And what was really important for him to see was that I was, one of the qualities you bring as a teacher is to be unconditionally accepting of anything they bring to the circle. So if a child said, I need help because I'm really unkind to other people and I find they're not, you know, they don't join in my games, then you say, thank you for being that honest. I know that's a really big thing for you to share with us. So Jack had to see me doing, you know, being that and I am kind of a bit like that anyway, but it kind of is a quality that is very important to have when you're doing circle time. And so eventually he joined, and if I was working in a training, you had to do circle time. Now I'd have my chair and I'd be turning it around, but basically he'd had the chair, he brought his chair into the circle, but his back was up to us, but he was kind of looking around like that. And then as the weeks went on, because he did circle time on a weekly basis, his chair started to move round, and so eventually he was joining in. And then he had a TA who was working with him, and she said to him, Jack, you know, some things with him was starting to improve. And he said, I've got a bit of a problem actually to his TA. I want to share it, but I need to talk it through with you. Can we write it down on a piece? And I always said to them, you can always write it down on a piece of paper if you know, so you're prepared. So he came into the circle this week and he said, I was doing a round of I don't like it when. And I was doing around I didn't like it when, and so every child's voice, I got to hear what they didn't like, what was going on. And some children said, I don't like it when I go into the playground, when people get rough, and sometimes I'm playing a game and I don't get let into the game. So kind of some of those issues around playtimes are coming up, and I knew Jack was he kind of was one of those who gets into fights. So he in the circle said, having his TA sitting next to him too, just to kind of help if he forgot, he said, I need help because I am the one who gets into fights. I am the one who actually, I lose my temper. Sometimes I know that I don't have anybody, I don't feel included, don't feel like I've got anybody to play with, and I am the one who hits out and hurts others. And that was absolutely massive for him to say.
Did you cry? I would cry.
Yeah, it is one. And circle times are those. I've had teachers in tears watching my circles over the years. It is incredible. And when I did in Swindon a couple of months, I think it's about a month ago, running some training, there were teachers like, I never thought that child would say that. And that's what teachers often say to me is, I never thought that child would own up to the fact that he's a bully. I never thought that child would say that. And I always say to them, the reason I'm a stranger who's come into your classroom, but the reason they say that to me is because they feel unconditionally loved and supported, and that I am not going to judge them. And that is why. Anyway, on this particular occasion, he asked for help and support to the class. The class came back with, and there's a phrase you use in so I call it the coaching circle, the coaching conference. It's the central kind of part of the circle time, and I'll talk a bit more about the structure in a little bit. But he said why he needed help, and the class come back with, well, would it help if you, or would it help if I structured the phraseology? Sorry, I've got my emails on and I probably need to turn those off while so it's not going ping ping ping. So let me just turn those off so we don't keep that going off. So he said he needed help. The class came back with, would it help, Jack, if you did X, Y, Z? Would it help if you counted to 10 when you thought these feelings were coming on board? A lot of them said, Jack, would it help if I was your friend? And he would go, yeah, that would really help. It was so sweet. And then others gave him kind of behavior management strategies of, would it help if when you felt this feeling coming, started to feel this feeling, that you kind of used a traffic light system and you removed yourself and go and stood or sat on the bench. And others would say, would it help if when I saw you getting wound up, that I just gave you a word, And then that just made you also, the children are amazing, and that's what I always say with behavior management. Your class have lots of solutions, and it's far more powerful coming from them than it is from us as a teacher. Far more powerful, and we're getting them to work collaboratively as a team. So that they came up with ideas. Jack said, what would really help me is if one of you notice when I'm starting this, you can see I'm starting to escalate in terms of I'm getting annoyed or upset. It would really help me if somebody came up to me and just reminded me and just said, I'm your friend, do you want to come off and play a game with me? That would help me. Distract me. Anyway, what I'd also noticed as Jack came up with some ideas to help and support him, and I always get children to create a little action plan of the ideas they've had from their class team. So he said, well, as a facilitator, I say, out of all those amazing ideas you've had, which one or two ideas would you like to use? So he came up with the ideas he wanted to use. And then I always say, and we'll follow this through. If it's a playtime issue, I'm going to check in with you after playtime. We're going to write all this down, what your goals are, what your targets are. They're often rewards as well that they get. But the reward can just be, actually, I had a good playtime. That really is the reward. And that people wanted to play with me. That's the reward for him. And so we usually write it down and track it. So just like you would do in good behavior management. But sometimes it can just be really informal. But I had noticed that my class were winding him up, and that some of the fireworks that are happening with him were because of the class dynamics. So I said to my class, Jack's been really brave, he's been really honest, but I've noticed that some of you are possibly winding him up a little bit, and it makes things worse for him. Could you be really honest and put your thumbs up now if you think you're one of those people that does this? And I had 95% of my class put their thumbs up, and I was really shocked. But not only was I shocked, but they were shocked, because they could actually in that circle see that actually they weren't helping him at all. They were really making things much worse for him. So I went around the circle and I said, what is it that you do to wind Jack up? And to each child, and they might say, well, I just pull faces at him. And then I'd say to Jack, is that true? Does that happen? And he would either go yes or no. So I so we just I checked in with him. And then I said to him, goodness, no wonder Jack's finding it really, really difficult. I thought, if this is happening, so what can we as a class agree to do to support Jack? So they agreed. I created a couple of playground friends in the class who were going to play with him each that particular week, and then ongoing weeks of that. We had different people. But Jack, what was so amazing, Adele, was after that, the children the following day, that day when they after lunchtime, were coming back into class going, we did this with Jack, or we did that with Jack, we did that. And then we had a meeting with Ed Psych and the parents were like, he's a completely different child. He's so good, his behavior's changed. I said, he's having happy playtimes, isn't he now? And he's he still had a few, he wasn't a complete miracle, he still had a few issues, of course, but he felt included, he felt part of the class team, he wasn't being scapegoated anymore.
Yes.
And that was a huge, his lunchtimes were happy lunchtimes, and the class felt they really liked him. So
that's such a gorgeous story.
It is very, very powerful for them. And I just think, in terms of how you do it, is just for anybody watching who wants to know how to do it, is I've got a structure. So I run circle time training. So I have, are we ready for circle time now? So it's a little and I get all schools to put that on there. I get them to put this in their class, every classroom to have this. So it looks at the skills you need to do a good circle time. So I always talk about, we all need to listen. We need to look and listen. And I talk to children about when we listen, we look as well at each other. And I do teach them really good listening skills, active listening skills. And they often think it's really funny when we go through what active listening is, because I do what listening skills aren't, and I get them to do an exercise called Deaf Ears, where they really don't listen to each other, and that's quite good fun too. So, but with really good looking and listening skills, so we focus a lot on that. Thinking skills, speaking skills, and concentrating skills. And then I get them to think, is our classroom, are the seats in a circle? And I get children to sit on chairs, because a lot of games involve moving chairs too. And some teachers are like, oh my goodness, it's a nightmare setting my classroom up. but you get the children to set it up. It's not about you as a teacher setting it up, and you get used to it, and then they put it back. But always I encourage teachers to set the classroom up in advance of your circle time. So they set it up usually after a break. So after they set up at lunchtime, so when you come back into lunchtime, it's not chaotic. So you don't want to have you don't want your class to be chaotic organising the classroom before you do circle time. It needs to be really calm. So and then as teachers, it's really important who we are when we do circle time, in terms of, are we regulated, are we in a good place, are we taking care of ourselves? If we need to, we're not good first thing in the morning, then think about doing it after lunch. So think about your energy levels and when you're in a good space, because we do need to be unconditionally accepting of them, and we do need to not be snappy or grumpy. So it's thinking about, and children, we also know when we sit in a circle, there'll be some children who will hype up and be a bit, misbehave. And if we're not in a good regulated space, we're going to, have a go at them. So I always say I'm unconditionally accepting of anything children bring in the circle, but with behaviour management as well. If children, you have your ground rules in terms of how you're expecting them to behave, and you just do that, the proximity praise, praising those who are doing what you want. I once had, this is really funny, I went to work in Ireland. I completely forgot about this until now. I went to work in Ireland, and it was a behaviour group of children. It was boys, and they were probably all about 11, 12 years old, and they were coming in from outside, and there was a circle of chairs, and they were as they were walking in, they suddenly got into the circle, and they started running around in the circle. And I was thinking, I've got all these adults watching on the outside, I've really got to model practice what I preach here. So one child was sitting down in a chair, and well done, you're sitting down so beautifully in that chair. And I said, it's actually really interesting to see one person in the chair. And then slowly another one sat down. Now I've got two people sitting down in the chair. That is just brilliant. A few were still circling around. And I just thought, never in a million years did I think it would work. I really honestly at that point thought, because we get tested, don't we, when we run behaviour management programs, and I thought it won't work. But actually they all ended up sitting down on the chairs because they realized they got praise. It's just amazing.
That reminds me, I challenged myself once. There was a particular student I was working with. She was in year 9, so about 13, 14, and sometimes I find this kind of age group of girls, for whatever reason, it can trigger me more quickly. I think it's to do with, when I look at my own practice, I think it's to do with like girls who were nasty to me when I was that age. So if I'm not careful, I have to remember I'm the teacher now, I'm the adult. So I had this young person who was really like, I could tell that if she did something, I reacted a lot quicker than if someone else did the same thing. And I was like, okay, I've got to find some equanimity here, because it's not her, it's clearly me. It's my stuff.
It's interesting though to be a reflective teacher, and that is a really big thing to be aware of.
Yeah. So, but what I did was exactly what you're saying. I tested my own theories, and I decided for the whole day I would consciously only talk to her about what she's doing well, or a kind of a guiding sentence about focusing back on the work. So as opposed to stop doing that, it would be, oh, you've got the pen out.
Yes.
You're now crawling up the wall, but you've got the pen out, and it is so interesting to test your own theory, isn't it? Because, at first she was a bit like, yeah, what, and off she went with her attitude. But as I just continuously did this, and really consciously, I didn't tell her she was doing anything wrong the whole day. And the difference by the end of the day, she had settled. She had settled in a way. I hadn't created any conflict. I'd also taken myself out of it. Like I'd taken my own reactions that I'd identified. I'd taken that out of the picture. And so all she got was, I care about her doing stuff well, and I care about her learning. And actually she was, because often I think as teachers we say that, I really care about your learning, I really care about your well-being, but then in our actions, is that what we're focusing on? And I think that's similar to you with that situation with the spinny people. It's like, actually, no, I do care. And I'm going to show you that because I'm going to do it. And that's all I'm going to do. And, you know, once I'd done that for one day, the difference in our relationship then, and I can't say that I didn't slip occasionally and tell her to, you know, take her coat off or what, you know, I can't say I was perfect, but even just spending that one day focusing in that way just shifted something. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's that unconditional positive regard, isn't it, that we know about. So and it is, all children can behave, all children are essentially good, you know, they've just got into some bad habits, some of them, and actually it's a way of, there's a purpose behind how they behave, gives them the attention, negative attention that they've got.
Yes.
Yeah,
I really want to pick up on, because obviously what you're talking about is, that example was infants, and I'm aware that you spend a lot of your time in infants and primary, so I want to pick up on a thread because I specialize in teenagers and secondary. That's kind of where I feel most comfortable. I can't do under 8s. I get a bit panic when they're under 8.
I use puppets with the very little ones, so the puppets have the problems, and then they give advice to the puppets. So it's really, really gorgeous.
Oh, that's cute. So what I think is really interesting is, by the time we get to secondary, what I find a lot of my job is, in terms of supporting positive behaviour once young people are at secondary, is unpicking the education journey they've had so far. Because if they've been labelled the naughty one, if they've had all the detentions, or they were the only kid in year 5 to have a detention, or what, you know, whatever it is, they bring these badges of honour to their secondary school, and we don't have the space and time in the same way that there is in primary. So what you're talking about, we sit down, we have circle time. I'm thinking, I have a form group for 15 minutes a morning, you know, and it's something that parents and carers find very difficult to readjust to in year 7. The amount of emails I would have saying, do you know where my child's swimming kit is? And I'm thinking, I saw your child for 15 minutes this morning with 33 other students. I have no idea where the swimming kit is.
They're so used to having that at primary. Yeah,
exactly. And I really do feel that in the British education system, that secondary is missing a trick. And whether it's circle time or it's something similar, occasionally schools will put this in PSHE, but I feel that where the hole is that the staff are not trained.
No, I absolutely agree. Yeah.
So, I mean, I just remember I did a PSHE lesson. I mean, I do a lot of PSHE, and I do teach a lot of those subjects. But one day I got a presentation saying, can you teach about eating disorders? And I just thought, I have no lived experience of that. I have no knowledge of that. And yet, statistically, I do know that there will be young people in front of me who are going through eating disorders right now. And I was like, how can I possibly teach that? That is not a good way. And I think this is similar with this kind of work, is that we might dump something like this into a PSHE lesson in secondary or form time, and yet we haven't got staff who are trained in it. So we get this really difficult kind of...
Actually, it can be very damaging. I'm sorry, my
yes,
just jumping up, which is one of those Zoom things, isn't it? Animals. Just landing in my pocket there, so come on. So it is if circle time is done badly, it can be very damaging. So there's no point doing it unless you are going to do it in the right way, because there are...
That's really good to know, actually.
It can be used to name and shame children. Yes. So I think the majority of teachers wouldn't do that, but there are teachers who would do it. And it is knowing that, you know, in terms of the qualities that you have as a teacher, just like you said, we carry our stuff, so we can be very quick to judge with certain children. So we have to have the self-awareness of our behaviours, which takes a certain maturity too to get to that. So that kind of ability to self-reflect, and I think any teaching we do, at the end of it, we do need to be able to reflect on, you know, well, who was I today? Did I show up to kind of be the best teacher I could have been? Was I going to judgment? Was I accepting? Was I harsh? You know, who was I loving? Was I caring? You know, was I expecting the best out of my children? But with circle time, and I have, like I was talking to you before we came onto the Zoom, was actually, I have changed it from being called circle time to coaching circles, and my background is in coaching, because what I found over the years is it's just sitting on a mat, doing a round, which is okay. But it's not really, it's a bit of show and tell, and that's what it is. It's not really circle time. So circle time for me has six elements to it. It's structured. So I kind of, in terms of my circles and what I teach is, I start with talking about the ground rules and skills. I've got what's called a circle model. So it goes CIRCLE. So each of the acronyms. So C is for circle time, ground rules and skills. I is for introductory activity, which is a game. R is for round and time to talk. C is for coaching, and that's the main part of the heart of the circle. L is for let's appreciate and celebrate, and E is for ending activity. So it's an acronym, and it supports staff in terms of that's the structure. It's how we do it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, when staff are starting to do it, they just take elements of that, and I often say to them, just take 3 parts of that structure and have a go, build some confidence, and enjoy doing it with the children. But it is a structured way of working, and a lot of it's really fun. The reason children want to do it is because it's great fun. We play lots. The start is usually you play a game at the very beginning, and games also teach skills. They teach social skills. It's about taking turns. It's about being included. There's just so many aspects for speaking, listening, etc. So there's so the game's fun, and what I find is my children, when I've done it when I've been teaching over the years, they always know it's timetable to set time each week. So mine was always on Thursday afternoon, don't know why, but it was. Then my children would come in on Monday morning and go, circle time today, and then it was like, oh, let's get the chairs ready for circle time. They absolutely love it because it's fun. And as children at the school I was working in the other week teaching circle time, coaching circles, the children say, I've just got to talk about, because I often say to them at the end, it's like, what did you like or what didn't you like about the circle? And they say to me, we got to talk about things that we don't normally talk about. And they often say, I got to let go of all my worries. I got to let go of things that really bother me. And they also often say is, I know that other people in this class feel the same way as me. I'm not the only one. And one of the reasons I do this is because I know for myself that it's quite personal, actually. For myself as a child, I went through a pretty difficult childhood with a very sick mum and a dad who wasn't around, parents who were going through the divorce and dad who wasn't around. And I know when my mum was ill, nobody ever asked me, are you okay? Nobody ever talked to me about her being ill. It was just assumed as a child, and this is what's happened with COVID too. It was just assumed I was okay. And if somebody sat me down in a circle and I got to see, oh, actually there are other people here who are going through, I don't normally talk about personal things, but it might be, there are times at school where I didn't feel included in the playground. So if I got to say, oh, I didn't have any, I feel a bit, one of the rounds might have been, I don't like it when I don't have anybody to play with in the playground. If I got to say that, then I would have found out that there's other people in my class who felt exactly the same way. But often, I remember being a teenager and one of my friends going, nobody likes me. I don't have any friends. Nobody wants to play with me. And thinking, oh gosh, do you feel like that? And it's that shared, actually, I'm not the only one who's going, I'm not the only one who's going, my parents going through divorce. I'm not the only one going through that.
Yeah. I want to share with you one of the really successful circle times I did in secondary, actually, and it reminds me of this. I was with a group of year 11s, this is kind of 15, 16-year-olds, and it was coming up to the exam time, and the behaviour was really changing in my classroom. The pressure of exam time and the fun and games of it. And so there was one of the times I did do a circle time, and I think what you're talking about really, really happened. So I had a mixed ability class, and there were clearly some children or some young people that everyone kind of knew that they were aiming for the 8s, the 9s, old money A's, A stars. And there were some who we were like, hopefully they pass. It was a real mixture in terms of ability. And I think one of the powerful things about the circle time, I mean, they moaned at me, it was hilarious, like, circle time, we're not in effing primary, miss, blah, blah, blah. But they loved it. And I have a cuddly wolf,
Oh,
and they pass the cuddly wolf around as like the talking stick, and they were like, oh, this is well lame, but they sat there stroking this cuddly toy, and they needed that nurture. They are still children.
yeah, it's a soothing.
Yeah, but what was really beautiful was the lower ability pupils were able to watch the higher ability pupils going, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a revision timetable. My parents are stressing me out. And the consensus, it was hilarious. The consensus of this circle was everybody was getting stressed by the motivational assemblies. The exam time. I don't know what it is, but schools feel the necessity to come on and go, you need to do your best. And often there's like a Paralympian going, I felt really like I couldn't go through this barrier, and now I have, and now I'm a Paralympian medalist. There's often these kind of assemblies around exam time, and all of these teenagers are going, they're really stressing us out. They're really putting on the pressure. And it was really beautiful to watch this mixed ability class who had very, very different friendship groups, very, very different home lives. They'd just all been lumped together because that school at the time was doing mixed ability in English. And to see them all just go, yeah, I don't like those assemblies. Yeah, they're really like pressury, aren't they? And to have this conversation. And then the big thing for me when we did that, I'm reflecting now on what you've said. I definitely used it because there was something wrong, because that was just my instinct. But I'm just trying to think, if only I'd have had that practice. But anyway, but the beautiful thing for me as well was that they fed back to me which parts of my teaching were helping them and which parts were not. And I have to say, you have to be in a certain place as a teacher to receive that, especially from teenagers who can tell you in 4-letter words. They can be very direct and very, very honest. But what they did is they talked about, Miss, when you did this, like, I just couldn't listen. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, my hours of planning, my hours of marking, but I sat with it, and it made me uncomfortable. I think this is part of this work. It's like it totally can reform a classroom if you're willing to sit in the uncomfortable bit at the time. And hearing it, I mean, I had one young person who, I think he was parroting his parents, let's put it that way, but he was very much talking about the philosophy of mixed ability and how he didn't feel it was correct and all this kind of stuff. And I'm there going, oh. But I went back, had a little cry myself. Then I took on board what they'd said. And guess what? I adapted my lessons. I differentiated my lessons. I planned for the class and the people in front of me, because now I knew more about the people in front of me. I knew more about their learning styles. I knew more about how they work, what works for them, and what is the point of not adapting for them, because I wanted them to do well in their exams. I wanted all of them to do well in their exams. Of course I did. And what was incredible again is after that circle time that we'd done, behaviour wasn't an issue again. We didn't have the disruption. We didn't have the kind of raging, aggressive hormone stress, falling out, conflict. I can't be asked. We didn't have any of that again, because I'd been able to listen and adapt, and they'd been heard. I think that was a big thing as well. So I wanted to share that example of, using it in secondary. It can work. And I think in secondary, we perhaps have to work harder to find those spaces.
Yeah, I think you do have to work hard. But there's a phrase that was coming to mind was, there's nothing so powerful that can't be voiced. And actually, you can voice anything, but you need to be in the space to be able to voice it and be accepted. And as you as a teacher in that space, it can be very hurtful when you do hear truth too at times. But you were, as hurtful as it was, there was a lot of truth spoken, and actually you were able to adapt and refine your teaching for those children, and they felt really validated and heard. And that is enormous. That's really, really good education.
It's massive, isn't it? And
relationships that you had as a result of that, and they had with each other, all relational, as we both say, it's all relational.
Yes.
Learn when they're in good relationships. So I think that's the other really lovely bit of circle time, is we learn so much ourselves in the process. We don't have to know everything. and it is about
Yes.
forum, is the children actually know so much. They know how to help and support each other. And it doesn't have to be us as a teacher telling them what to do all the time. They actually, you know, particularly your old, but even young ones, they do know what to do. I think
Absolutely.
That power is it's very, very powerful. But as you said, there needs to be a time slot. So there needs to be a weekly time slot, and that's what I always say to my schools, is you need to timetable it on a weekly basis at a set time, so your children feel safe and secure that their voices will be heard on Thursday afternoon. I often have post boxes as well, where they can put any problems they've got during the week into that post box, anything they want to talk about. But it is at secondary, one of the things I do is I go into schools and I teach. I run what I call a circle time and action day. So it's in a school day. So it's not an inset training day, it's an in school day. So teachers get released to come and watch me doing a circle. And so they observe it. And when they observe it, they see how powerful it is and they see how it works. And they want to do it. It's not, oh, you know, this is some new fad. This is like, oh my goodness, that's so powerful. What impact would that have if I go and take that into my classroom? I model it so that they can then take the exact same lesson I've just done and do it with their class. So it is, you know, and I remember when I was teaching, I used to get fed up of training programs where I've just been told what to do, and I never really took anything back into my classroom. I was like, maybe one, I'd always think if I come away with one idea. I remember when I got into training, and I did work with Jenny Mosley, the quantity circle time model. So that's kind of, I've taught circles throughout the world actually now. So I've done an awful lot. So it is, yeah, it is. What was I saying that? I've lost my train of thought, Adele. What was I saying?
About modelling it in the classroom.
Yes,
so that they can see the effect.
Yeah, so I think that kind of modelling sorry, I'm just going in a menopause blank.
That's all right. I just want to pick up on something actually that I think might be useful. If you are sitting there and you are you are a secondary teacher thinking there isn't a time we're not going to get the training, there's something that I want to share actually, that I share in my practice when I'm supporting a school, and I think it might be one of your aspects, it might be one of your 6 aspects. So what I do is, generally in secondary you have to take the register at the start of most lessons, and I do not need to hear yes miss times 33. It's not a good use of my time. And so what I do is I use the register as a check-in. And so instead of the pupils saying yes miss or yes mux or yes sir, I ask them to respond with 1 to 2 words of how they feel that day.
Brilliant.
And when you start this, particularly if it is secondary, you will get bored, tired for a lot of it initially, and keep going, because the magic of this is that once, and I imagine this is kind of a similar thing to circle time, once the young people start feeling that it's safe enough to share a little bit of how they're feeling, then I start getting kind of a bit more truth, and I can get things like actually pretty good day, or really frustrated, or rubbish break time, or and you start to get these little snippets. And what this does is that in the first 2 minutes of your lesson, you've done a litmus test, you've done some formative assessment, you know where your young people are, and from there you can adapt and differentiate and make the lesson as relevant to where they are as possible. So if it's been wet break and all the kids have been in the library driving each other mad and they're all really fizzy, it might not be the moment straight away then for me to get the paints out, for example. But I know that in the register. And what I love about this model is it's already part of the routine of a secondary school. Like you're saying, the regularity of it is really important, that the young people know that they're going to be asked for that at the start of every register. And so it's regular, but also it doesn't take any of your precious lesson content curriculum learning time, and it's obviously not at all as in depth as a coaching circle or as a circle time, but it's just a little nugget that you can put into schools. And I know several schools now who've done this, and what's really fruitful is you get firstly the feedback in that moment for that one lesson, but then it stacks up accumulatively. So over the weeks, over the months, you get to know that class, you get to know kind of more or less what their words are, what their responses are. And then you start getting really fine-tuned to the pupils and the class. So if a pupil who usually says they're okay suddenly says stressed out, your ears, you just notice it because you're doing it every register. You notice that difference, and you know that, okay, that's the young person who might need a quick conversation or some support or whatever it is. And then what I find as well in secondary, when you get to pressure points in the year, like exams times and things, the language often does change. And again, you can kind of build up and know how to then adapt your lessons and plan your learning to account for that. And so it's just the most, I just love this. I tell everybody, because it's just the most simple thing. It takes no extra planning and no extra time. Also, it really helps with that argument people say to me often is, okay, I'd love to do loads of preventative behaviour management. I'd love to build relationships, but I teach 6 classes a day, all different ones, and I teach over 200 pupils a week. I mean, art teachers, DT teachers, people who have a class once a fortnight or something, some crazy thing. And they say to me, I would love to build relationships, but I have 47 minutes, or a fortnight. But this is a way you can do it. You can start to build those relationships and get that in. And also in a similar model to circle time, because they're doing it in front of each other, it does start to form that little, I don't know what you'd call it, a respect or a community or a bubble in which they are sharing. No, bubble's got negative connotations now. I scratched that word. It means that you are creating this safe space within your classroom where young people can express a little bit, and if you're inviting them to express a little bit, then when you go to them and there's one of them who is going through something and you need to support, it's like you've already got a way in, because you've already started the conversation. Even though it's tiny, you've at least started it. And then the final point I would say is I model it myself. So I also say within that register, and today I am snappy. And then they know.
No, it's really good. Very honest. Yeah, because I think we need to be modelling that as staff too. But I think that's just so lovely. It's also about developing emotional literacy. We see it happen in primary school where children have their mood boards and they put how they're feeling on the mood board. But that's kind of if they've had that work in primary, then they're going to be more emotionally literate going into secondary. So they'll be able to have a range. A lot of, there's like the 4 feelings, aren't they? Happy, sad, angry, scared. But we need to develop that much further in terms of, that vocabulary. So also in secondary, if they haven't learned that in primary, then that might extend into their more of a emotionally literate language for them, which I think is so important, because that a lot of it is about expression. And that's where, when I'm working with schools, it is about, through the circles, children develop emotional literacy. They develop that being able to express. And we all know in terms of mental health, if children can express, then we won't see the mental health issue, a lot of the mental health issues that we have. A lot of the eating disorders, self-harm are coming from children not expressing, not being able to communicate what's going on in their worlds. And when we can, and that's where I think if you're doing regular circle times, you're teaching children it's okay to express, and adults can be there to support you. And we're there.
Yes. And this is where, coming back right to the start when I was talking about in my intro, is that I see a lot of this work happening in alternative provisions right through primary and secondary, even to kind of special schools that are working in kind of further education. This emotional literacy, this expressing of how we're doing, how are each other doing, it's just common practice. And I almost feel like we're almost doing it too late, because by the time a young person is in a PRU, a pupil referral unit, or a special school, often it's because something quite extreme has happened to them in their lives, which has meant that they haven't been able to fit into the system that is mainstream. And I almost feel like if we were able to catch that earlier, to have that space for them to express. I mean, like you said, as a child of what you were going through, there was no outlet for that. And for some people, I think as well, for some of our young people, when we talk about behaviour, it's that, you know, aggressive, shouty, throwing. But also I work with young people who take it internally. And their behaviour might be shy, their behaviour might be to just comply, but that doesn't necessarily mean they feel safe, they're happy, they're learning. It just means they're going through the motions like a robot. And I think those young people, their behaviour is something I'm always very aware of, because we're less likely to see it. I've got 34 in front of me. I've got 3 about to set their blazer alight. Well, my attention is kind of going to be over there, more than the young person who's sat just kind of quietly doing it.
Yeah, I always say they're the children that worry me the most, because the one who's lighting something up and putting something on fire is telling me they've got a problem. Those children have given up. They actually have given up, that there's nobody there to help them. And actually, they're the ones who are usually dissociating, not with it. And I know for myself, as a child, I was very well behaved. Most of the time I was very well behaved, but I was pretty compliant, I think I was. But I was very quiet. Yeah, I was just very quiet and a good girl.
Yeah.
Inverted commas. And then I was going to say that, but I was not achieving. I was very much off with the fairies. I was disassociating, and I was doing okay, but I was a lot smarter than I was doing at school. I remember failing my 11 plus and being really embarrassed about that. But yeah, it was just, but I would have passed my 11 plus if mum had been okay, and the home life would have been okay. But and when I got into secondary school, I actually started to achieve, because mum got a job, her health got better, she was very much got into naturopathy and healed herself through complementary therapies, and it was just, her story is amazing actually. But she's kind of just an amazing role model for me, she's been. But I think because mum got better and our home life got better, I then was able to learn. And kind of like, and then I realized, oh gosh, I'm actually quite smart, really. Well, you know, by that time I really didn't think I was very smart, but because you've gone through an education system kind of thinking you weren't doing particularly well. But I remember getting the top marks in my O-level class and just thinking, gosh, you know, I am much smarter than I thought I was. And I think but that was to do with when we're emotionally safe, when we feel okay, when our family life's good, you know, we can learn. And I think it's putting those systems into place in our schools. You know, and expression is such an important, look, what I see, I think what kind of upsets me sometimes is we're putting counsellors into school, which actually absolutely have their place, but we do not have enough support in terms of mental health for our students. We don't have counselling for every single child. We don't have that emotional social support for everybody. We just can't do it. Our system's overflowing. CAMHS is at a crisis point. You have to almost be committing suicide before you get help now. It is tragic state of affairs for our young people. But what we can do in a very proactive way is to have regular children meeting in regular circles, and that supports their mental health. So if we're doing it once a week, we've got a natural system where they know their voices are going to be listened to.
Yes.
And that will support mental health of any child in a school. And I also think it's fun. So yes. And I always having fun, it's great.
And I always argue as well, I think, because as a behaviour specialist, you know, I do get the counter arguments a lot of like, how are we going to have time, and what about the curriculum? And I mean, the current government that has created the syllabus in secondary at the moment, you know, it's very content heavy. It's much more content heavy than it used to be. We have terminal exams now rather than coursework, so there's all sorts of big pressures in that sense on teachers to design their lessons in a way that is focused on that. It's like, oh, we haven't got through the content, and I think it's really, really worth saying that I hope, as both the examples that you've shared and that I have, is that through stopping to do that time where there can be a sharing, actually it saved time in the long run.
Absolutely.
You know, because with that year 11 class that I did that circle time with, I was bashing my head against the wall. They weren't learning. They weren't getting anywhere. They were so stressed, you know. But after that lesson, I think I took half a lesson to do that circle time. But after that, I mean, then basically in the run up to the exams, we were fine.
Almost
So
like
it's
pressure cooker with them. There was a pressure cooker, and then you took, you allowed some pressure to come out. So actually they were able to then learn better and be happier. It's like so.
yes.
Yeah.
I think we need to finish up soon, but there's just a last kind of point that I want to tie this up with, which is we've touched on it, around inclusion and belonging. And I'm going to put bias in there, because this is something I talk about a lot in my behaviour training. There's a chapter on it in my book, because this idea that we all feel safety in the same way can be really, really a block to learning for our young people. And what I've discovered is that what feels safe to me might not feel safe to you, and vice versa. And if I go into a classroom and assume that everybody's feeling safe and included and belonging and welcomed, and I start my lesson there, I've already lost a percentage of the class. And I think this is a whole other topic, but I think what I see in circle time and practices like that is that it helps, like you were saying, those kids who were putting their thumbs up because they'd also done mean things to Jack, and looking around and having that realization of like, oh, other people experiencing similar things to me, doing similar things to me. I'm part of this community. How can we work together to move this forwards? It is such a it's such a kind of, I don't know, to me it's just fundamental. If my kids don't feel safe in my classroom, how can I expect them to do anything, let alone out in public or
safe, you can't learn. That's the fundamental number one, isn't it? I did remind me, so you're saying that, I know we're about to finish, but there's a brilliant game, just so I can mention it on this, is called Silent Statement. So basically you would say to children, stand up and cross a circle if you like the color blue. But then you can take it a bit further. You might get, stand across a circle if you like baked beans at breakfast. Stand up and cross a circle. So you do light things, and then you can move into stand up across a circle if you didn't have breakfast this morning. So that's an interesting thing. Stand up and cross a circle if you find it difficult to find friends in the playground at lunchtime. Stand up and cross a circle if you're struggling with it might be you're struggling with your literacy at the moment, or you're spelling at the moment, or stand up and cross a circle if it can get just so you if you felt angry today or yesterday, so you're starting to find out a bit more about the children too. So it starts off quite light, but then you kind of get a gauge of where your kids are.
I love that as well. They don't have to verbalize, because verbalizing can be hard, especially for pupils with SEMH, social, emotional, mental health issues, the ones that I work with a lot. Often one of the biggest things that they find hard is articulating. And actually that like you said, that blazer being set alight is actually them saying, I feel scared, but they can't articulate that. And what the danger is, in especially in mainstream, is if we react to the behavior, we react to the fire, both metaphorically and physically, but actually we have to look at what's behind that behavior. And I love that game, they don't have to say anything. That's really useful.
Silent statements is a really
really nice. So I think we'll finish off. I'm going to share something that I'm doing right now, and then invite you to do the same. Yeah. So actually this kind of goes on really well in terms of the thing we were talking about children being able to see that they're not alone and they're included and other people feel the same as them. And I've recently created something for the staff to do exactly this. So I've created the We Give a Shit behaviour membership, and essentially it's based on the topics of the book, my book, Miss I Don't Give a Shit, and it's an online ongoing support and community for issues around behaviour. So each month I will lead a workshop. We'll have behaviour challenges, there's behaviour boosts that come in your inbox, all sorts of kind of things around it. But the main core of it is exactly this. It's us going, hang on a minute, I locked myself in the cupboard today because it was so bad. You know, what can I do? Or a kid's doing this to me and I feel like I can't teach anymore. What can I do? And it's it's the same idea actually of what we're talking about here. It's forming a community and a space so that we can talk about these things. And even if those things are, I don't even have time to practice what I'd love to around behaviours and relationship building. How do I build that in? So that's what I'm doing right now. And if you want to come and be a part of that, you can grab that on my website, which is adelbateseducation.co.uk. So you can come over and play there. And of course, grab the book, Myths I Don't Give a Shit, Engaging and Challenging Behaviour in Schools. You can find me on Twitter at AdelBatesZ, and I'm on LinkedIn. I think that you just put your name in for LinkedIn. Is that how that works? Yeah. I'm quite new on there.
I think so, yeah. No.
Yeah, cool. So tell us, what are you up to?
What am I up to? Well, lots, Adele, too, just like you. I think that's amazing what you're creating. And so we've just had our book, The Big Book of School Wellbeing, come out. So that's been a real amazing. You're also one of the authors in here. I've got 26 authors in total. I'm a co-editor and a co-author as well on this. So that's just, and I've also got my 101 playground games for anybody who wants to buy a book for creating happy playtimes for children in school. It's really important that we're actually teaching games. There's also circle games in here as well. So there's a whole chapter of 10 circle games, but lots of these can be played in circle time too. I do encourage my schools who are wanting to develop their coaching circles using games from there too. But my programs that I am sharing with schools is, obviously, if you want to do circle time training or coaching circle training, as I now call it, go to my website www.theresehoyle.com. Also, I am, as you know, very, very passionate about the lunchtimes and playtimes part of the school day. It's often the time in the day where children go back into classroom after lunchtime, not actually able to engage in their work. We as teachers lose really good teaching and learning time. So it's a really fundamental time in the day for us to work on. So I've got my Positive Playtime Masterclass program, which is a 2 to 3 day training program, or my How to Be a Lunchtime Supervisor Superhero training program. So lots of my schools are now booking onto that as an online program. If you're a math or if you're a primary school, book in, and it's a half-day training program or 2.5-hour training program. So so come and join me, and come to my website www.theresehoyle.com.
What's www?
www.
Oh, I've never heard that before.
What do you say?
I don't. I just say adelbateseducation.co.uk.
So, and I'm on Twitter at Therese Hoyle and LinkedIn, and
we'll put links to the post.
But just get in touch if you've got any questions as well to do with what we've talked about today. Please get in touch with either Adele or I, and we'd love to help and support. And obviously it's about circles, and that's something I feel very, very passionately about, because I know it makes a massive difference to children in your school. So you'll also find on my website coaching circles, so have a little look.
Oh, thank you so much for this conversation that we finally had.
Having this.
Hopefully we'll be seeing each other in real life soon.
It's been
thank you very much for watching. Bye. Bye. Boop. She wants to know that.